The courtroom fell silent the moment the drunk officer stumbled inside, swaggering like he owned the place. His crooked uniform and reckless grin made everyone shift in their seats. Without hesitation, he marched straight up to Judge Judy's bench, ignoring the bailiff, ignoring the rules, ignoring the danger. He leaned in, eyes wild, and hissed, "I am your boss. This is your last warning." A cold shock rippled through the room. Judge Judy slowly lifted her gaze, calm, sharp, unshaken, and when she finally spoke, her voice cut through the air like a blade. What she said next didn't just silence the courtroom. It changed everything. You will be shocked when you listen this. But before we jump in, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The air shifted the moment he walked in. The officer's words still hung in the air, sharp and reckless, like the echo of a match struck too close to gasoline. The bailiff froze mid-step, unsure if he had just witnessed a threat or the beginning of a collapse. Judge Judy did not move. She simply watched him, calm, steady, unblinking. The courtroom felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. The drunk officer stood barely a foot from Judy's bench, his crooked uniform hanging off him like it had given up trying to hold him together. His grin wavered, not because he regretted the threat, but because he finally realized how loudly he had spoken it. The bailiff's voice broke the silence. "Sir, step back from the bench, now." But the officer did not move. He tilted his head, eyes glassy, lips curling into something between a smirk and a plea. "I told you," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am your boss. You answer to me." Judge Judy's expression did not shift. Not a blink, not a breath out of place. Her composure became a mirror, reflecting his instability back at him with more precision than any insult could offer. "Is that so?" she said, her voice measured, controlled, almost gentle. The gentleness was what made the room tense. He swayed slightly, gripping the edge of her bench as if claiming territory. "You judges forget who signs your authority. I can—" Judge Judy lifted one hand, palm facing him. The gesture was not dramatic. It was deliberate, like someone lowering the volume of chaos. "That is close enough," she said. "Step back and stand where you belong." The officer laughed under his breath, but the sound cracked in the middle. His confidence wavered like a man trying to balance on a floor he suddenly realized was slippery. Behind him, the audience shifted, chairs creaked, breaths quickened, fear and disbelief blending in the air. Near the witness stand, a young woman, the victim, shrank in her seat, her eyes fixed on the officer with the kind of fear that did not come from this moment alone. Her fingers curled around a folded paper in her lap, knuckles white as if holding it kept her from falling apart. Judge Judy noticed. She always noticed. "Bailiff," she said, still watching the officer, "re-establish boundaries immediately." The bailiff moved, steady but tense, stepping between the officer and the bench. The officer's jaw twitched, as if deciding whether to push back or retreat. His pride chose one direction, his balance chose another. "You think a bailiff scares me?" he hissed. "No," Judge Judy answered softly, "but the truth should." Her eyes dropped, purposefully slowly, to something slipping from the officer's jacket. A single, folded document, creased, stained, handled too many times. It dangled for a second, caught between fabric and gravity, and then it fell. A faint rustle, a whisper of paper hitting the floor. The officer looked down. So did everyone else. The bailiff bent to pick it up, but Judy's voice stopped him cold. "Do not touch it," she said. "Let him explain why that document exists." The officer's face drained of color, sober for the first time. The paper lay between them like a dropped secret, silent, fragile, and dangerous. The officer stared at it as if it had betrayed him by falling too soon. Judy's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in recognition. For a moment, no one moved. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, the fluorescent lights humming softly above, casting long shadows that stretched toward the abandoned document. The officer shifted his weight, his bravado draining as quickly as the color in his face. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to snatch the paper up and erase it from the world. Judy spoke before he could act. "Step away from it," she said, her voice low and unwavering. The officer froze. The authority he had been pretending to possess suddenly felt flimsy against the gravity of her tone. The bailiff stepped closer, eyes locked on the officer, ready to intervene. At Judy's nod, the bailiff bent, not all the way, just enough to see the top of the page. His brows rose, not dramatically, but unmistakably. He lifted the document with the same care someone might use to retrieve evidence from a crime scene and passed it directly to her bench. The moment Judy touched it, the air thickened. Her fingers skimmed the header, tracing the printed words. Then the corners of her mouth pressed into a line that meant something was very, very wrong. "It appears," she said slowly, "we have a memo." The officer swallowed hard. "It is official business," he blurted. "You are not authorized to—" She raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. Judy read aloud, her tone almost clinical, despite the absurdity of the content. "Temporary supervisory jurisdiction granted to Officer Daniel Hartman, overriding standard courtroom chain of command." A shift rippled through the room, whispers, disbelief, a faint gasp from somewhere in the back row. The victim's head jerked up. Her eyes widened at the document, wild recognition, not surprise. She pulled her folded paper closer to her chest, as though instinctively shielding herself from a memory. Judy continued reading, each word slicing through the officer's crumbling confidence. "Effective immediately. Judge must comply. Disciplinary authority transferable." She set the paper down with deliberate precision. "This is a forgery," she said, not as an accusation, but as an observation carved from experience. The officer flinched. No, it is not. It was given to me by my sergeant. He knew about today. He wanted order. Your sergeant's name?" Judy asked. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His tongue searched for a lie, but even lies require structure, and he no longer had any. The victim's voice broke through the tension, soft but shaking. "I have seen that memo before," she whispered. "He showed it to me when I refused to follow his orders." Judy turned her gaze sharply toward the officer. The room went still. "Is that why you brought it here?" she asked. "To intimidate this court the same way you intimidated her?" No," he stammered. "You are twisting. This is not—" Judy leaned back, her gaze piercing. "Then tell us," she said. "Who forged this for you?" The officer's breath hitched. His eyes darted, searching the room for support that did not exist. Before he could speak, the victim lifted her trembling hand. "I think," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I know exactly where that memo came from." The officer tried to speak, but the words snagged somewhere between his pride and his fear. His mouth opened, then closed, like he could not decide which lie might save him first. The courtroom waited, still as stone. Judy watched him with a level stare, the kind that stripped away theatrics and left only truth standing. The officer shifted backward instinctively, as though her silence pushed him harder than any physical force. The forged memo on the desk seemed to glow under the harsh lights, a quiet witness to everything he had tried to hide. He finally managed a sound. She does not know what she is talking about," he stammered, pointing toward the victim with a hand that trembled just enough to betray him. But the victim did not shrink this time. She inhaled slowly, gathering courage like someone stepping out of a long shadow. "Officer Hartman showed me that memo 3 months ago," she said. Her voice wavered. But her resolve did not. "He said he had authority over the department, and over me." A chill rippled through the courtroom, quiet, unmistakable. Judy's eyes flicked toward the officer. "Is that true?" He shook his head too quickly, too desperately. "She is lying. She has always had a problem with authority." "That is not what it sounds like," Judy interrupted gently, her tone razor-sharp beneath the softness. The officer's face twitched. His badge glinted under the fluorescent lights, but something about it looked duller now, as if even the metal felt ashamed. The victim continued, her voice steadier now. "He told me he could reassign me. He told me he could make an example of me if I did not do what he said." Her eyes fell to the floor. "I was scared. I did not know what was real." Judy studied her closely, then looked back at the officer. "She seems quite clear today," she said. "You, however, seem unable to provide a single consistent answer." The officer's jaw clenched. "This is all blown out of proportion," he muttered. "You are letting her manipulate you." "Manipulate?" Judy repeated, her eyebrows lifting ever so slightly. I have been in a courtroom for decades. I know manipulation when I see it. It does not look like her. He opened his mouth again, but this time nothing emerged, not even a lie. His breathing hitched, shallow and uneven. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he seemed sober enough to feel cornered. The victim's hand shook as she reached into her bag. "There is more," she whispered. "I never wanted to use it, but I recorded him, not to hurt him, just to protect myself." The officer's head snapped toward her. "You what?" Judy leaned forward, the light catching her glasses in a sharp glint. "Recordings," she said softly. "That's an interesting word." The victim nodded, pulling out a small flash drive, her fingers trembling with the weight of truth she had carried too long. "I have 3 of them. I did not know if anyone would believe me." Judy extended her hand toward the bailiff. "Bring it here." The officer stepped back, pulse visible in his throat, the first clear fracture in his manufactured authority. As the bailiff delivered the flash drive to the bench, the victim added one more trembling sentence. "There is something on those recordings, something he never meant anyone to hear." The courtroom dimmed, not because the lights changed, but because the truth was about to. The bailiff plugged in the flash drive, and the screen on Judy's bench flickered like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. The officer's confidence evaporated at the sound of the first click. A soft hiss of audio filled the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of the officer's voice, clear, sober, and venomous. "If she does not listen," the recording began, "I will ruin her. I do not care how." A collective shiver passed through the courtroom. Even the air seemed to recoil. Judy watched without blinking, her posture perfectly still, as if absorbing every syllable with surgical precision. The officer tensed, gripping the edge of his seat, shoulders hunched like the recording itself had weight. "That," he stammered, "that was taken out of context," Judy finished for him, eyes still on the screen. "Yes, you seem very fond of that word." The second recording began automatically. His voice again, this time colder, steadier. "You think a judge scares me? I can get any courtroom to bend. They know better than to cross me." A gasp rippled across the audience. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Even the bailiff's jaw tightened, his hands curling at his sides. The victim pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, hearing again the threats she had tried so hard to forget. Judy finally looked at the officer. Her gaze was not angry. It was disappointed. And somehow that disappointed calm was worse than fury. "Officer Hartman," she said softly, "do you recall saying these words?" He shook his head violently. No, this is manipulated. She is trying to frame me. This is all." His excuses collided with the third audio file. This one was different, quieter, the tone more unhinged. "The next time," he whispered on the recording, "I will show her. I will show everyone." The silence that followed was suffocating. For a moment, even the digital hum of the speakers faded into the background. The courtroom had become a vacuum, pulling in fear, disbelief, and the heavy realization that this was no longer just intimidation. This was escalation. The officer stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "This is fake! All of it! She is lying! She has always lied!" "Sit down," Judy said. He did not. His chest heaved, his face flushed, words tumbling without coherence. "I am a decorated officer. You cannot take her side. You cannot—" "I am not taking sides," Judy said calmly. "I am listening to your own voice." He froze. The stillness that followed was the most honest moment he had shown all day. Judy folded her hands. "There is something missing from these recordings," she said slowly, "and I believe it may be the most important part." The officer looked confused, then terrified. "It seems," she continued, "there is a fourth recording." His face collapsed. "And unlike the others," Judy added, her voice turning into a quiet blade, "this one did not come from the victim, but from someone inside your own department." The side door creaked open before anyone could react to Judy's revelation. A uniformed officer stepped inside, steady posture, trembling eyes, and for the first time, Officer Hartman stopped talking. He froze mid-breath, as though the sight of the newcomer stunned him more than the recordings had. The colleague walked forward slowly, hat in hand, gaze fixed on the floor. His boots echoed across the tile, a hollow, guilty rhythm that seemed to shake the tension loose from the walls. Judy watched him approach, her expression unreadable. "State your name for the record," his voice cracked. "Officer Samuel Rhodes, ma'am." The defendant reacted instantly. "Rhodes? No, absolutely not. He does not belong here. He has no authority to—" "You are in no position to determine authority," Judy said, her tone sharp but quiet. Rhodes swallowed hard, his shoulders squared in a way that looked painful, like courage stitched together over months of fear. I was the one who submitted the fourth recording, Your Honor." The room shifted, like everyone leaned forward without meaning to. Hartman's voice shot through the quiet. "You traitor! You think you can walk in here and destroy my career? After everything?" Rhodes flinched but didn't retreat. "Your career?" he repeated softly. "This is not about your career." Judy lifted a hand, inviting Rhodes to continue. He inhaled deeply. We have complained about him before, several times, but the higher-ups kept bearing it, said he just needed guidance, said he was too valuable, said we should give him room to recover." "Recover?" Judy echoed. Rhodes nodded, shame flickering across his face. "He was reprimanded a year ago for threatening a superior during a drunken outburst." He hesitated. "Assaulted him, actually. Minor, but enough to warrant suspension." The audience gasped. Even the bailiff's eyes widened a fraction. "But the department covered it up," Rhodes continued. "Said it would hurt morale to let internal affairs investigate. So they kept promoting him. More responsibility, more access, more power." Hartman surged forward, veins rising along his neck. "You liar! None of that is proven. None of it." Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Officer Hartman, sit down." The command landed with the weight of a verdict. He obeyed, trembling with rage he could no longer disguise. Rhodes turned toward the victim, his voice breaking. He intimidated her the way he intimidated all of us, except she had the courage to say no. The victim's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Judy folded her hands. "Officer Rhodes, why come forward now?" He hesitated. Then the truth came out like something he'd been holding in for far too long. "Because when I heard today's recordings, I realized he wasn't just dangerous inside the department, he was dangerous everywhere, and if someone didn't stop him, someone was going to get hurt." Hartman slammed his fist against the table. "You think you are better than me? You think—" "No," Rhodes said quietly. "I think I finally stopped being afraid of you." The courtroom fell into a deep, heavy silence. Rhodes stepped closer to the bench, lowering his voice to a trembling confession. "Judge, there is something else, something he did that none of us reported, and it changes everything." The courtroom door opened again, quietly, cautiously, as if the truth itself was stepping inside on unsteady legs. The man who entered wore the same uniform as Hartman, but carried none of his arrogance, and when he lifted his eyes toward Judge Judy, the room sensed a shift it had been waiting for. Officer Rhodes did not move from where he stood, but his breath caught when the second witness approached. This man, Officer Caleb Mercer, looked younger, tense and exhausted in a way that did not come from lack of sleep, but from carrying a secret too long. "State your name," Judy said, her tone firm but not unkind. He straightened. "Officer Caleb Mercer, ma'am." Hartman laughed, a jagged, unstable sound. "Oh, this is rich. You brought Mercer, the rookie? He folds under pressure. You think he has anything reliable to say?" Mercer flinched at the words, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, closer to Rhodes. Two officers, aligned not by command, but by conscience. Judy tilted her head slightly. "Officer Mercer, why are you here?" He swallowed hard. "Because I should have spoken sooner." The admission hung in the air like a confession overdue. Mercer looked toward the victim. His voice softened, thick with guilt. "I saw him threaten her in the hallway that day, not physically, but the way he spoke, the way he cornered her." His throat tightened. It wasn't the first time he used his badge like a weapon. A whisper rippled through the courtroom. Shock, outrage, recognition. Hartman slammed his palm on the table. "They are lying, both of them. This is some orchestrated conspiracy." "Enough," Judy said. The word landed like a gavel strike before the actual gavel moved. Hartman froze, breathing hard, his anger turning into something raw and unfiltered. Mercer continued, voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "After that hallway incident, I tried to file something. Rhodes did too. But internal affairs, they buried it. Said we were misinterpreting his tone. Said it was harmless. Judy's gaze sharpened, but she allowed him to continue. Mercer clasped his hands to steady them. When I heard the recordings today, I knew everything we feared was real. Worse than real. He exhaled shakily, and I realized silence isn't loyalty. It's complicity. Rhodes nodded slowly beside him. The victim's eyes shimmered with a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that someone had seen her truth. Heartbreak that no one spoke until now. Hartman's voice cracked as he tried to regain control. You think this changes anything? You think it changes everything, Mercer said quietly. And the steadiness in those 3 words shattered what remained of Hartman's composure. For the first time, the badge did not protect him. The truth did. Judy folded her hands, the weight of the testimony settling like dust onto the courtroom's still air. Officer Mercer, she said, is there anything else the court needs to know? He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. There's one more thing. Something we never documented. Something we were afraid to put on paper. The room held its breath. Mercer's voice sank to a whisper, yet it echoed louder than any shout. He didn't just intimidate us. He kept something we found in his locker, something that proves today wasn't sudden, it was planned. Hartman went pale. Mercer stepped forward, eyes fixed on Judy. Judge, we found a file with your name on it, and you need to see what's inside. The room tightened around Mercer's words, as if the walls themselves leaned in. A file with Judge Judy's name on it. Suddenly, this case was no longer just about intimidation. It was about intent. Judy did not speak at first. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, gaze fixed on Mercer as if weighing not just his words, but the tremor beneath them. The audience held its breath. Even the air seemed to steady in anticipation. Explain, she finally said. Mercer nodded, though fear flickered across his expression. It was in his locker, a manila folder, your name written on the tab. At first we thought it was paperwork from a previous case you handled. Hartman lurched forward, face blazing red. Do not talk about my locker. You had no right. He broke into my... It was not locked, Rhodes interjected sharply, just like you never locked anything you wanted people to see. The courtroom murmured, uncertain whether that was arrogance or carelessness, or something more calculated. Judy gestured for Mercer to continue. He took a shaky breath. Inside the file, there were printed screenshots of your past rulings, transcripts, notes scribbled in the margins. He highlighted moments where you challenged officers. Mercer hesitated, swallowing hard. And he wrote comments beside them. Comments? Judy asked. Mercer nodded. Things like, she thinks she's untouchable, and one day someone needs to put her in her place. The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water, disappearing fast, leaving ripples that shook the room. The victim gasped softly. Rhodes clenched his jaw. Even the bailiff shifted uneasily, as if something about the revelation chilled the temperature of the courtroom. Hartman snapped, "Those were jokes, private jokes. You can't take that seriously. Everyone vents. Not everyone creates a dossier," Judy said, her tone razor thin. Mercer raised a hand. "Your Honor, there's more. He didn't just take notes on your rulings. He followed your schedule." Mercer's voice dropped even lower. Court times, media appearances, public events. A cold wave flowed through the room, visible, collective, undeniable. Judy's expression did not change, but the smallest flicker passed through her eyes, a glimmer of understanding, a connection of pieces that suddenly aligned. Hartman's words came out choked. "I was preparing for reassignment. I needed to study judicial behavior. That's all." "Then why," Mercer said, cutting in, "did you staple a copy of today's docket to the front of the file weeks before it was even posted?" The officer's face collapsed into something twisted, half fury, half panic. His lie had finally outrun him. Judy leaned forward just slightly, her voice a soft blade. "Officer Hartman, were you planning this confrontation?" "No," he gasped. "No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The victim whispered, "He knew he would see you today." The room exhaled in one trembling wave. shock mixing with the slow, inevitable realization that the officer's arrogance had never been spontaneous. It had been rehearsed, planned, practiced. Judy lowered her voice, calm and devastating. Bailiff, retrieve the folder from evidence. Her eyes locked on Hartman. Let us see what else he prepared. The monitor flickered on, its glow slicing through the tension like a cold blade. No one breathed, not the audience, not the bailiff, not even Hartman, because everyone sensed the same thing. Whatever appeared on that screen would destroy the last piece of his illusion. The footage loaded slowly, the buffering wheel spinning like a countdown to truth. Judy watched with composed stillness, her eyes reflecting the light in controlled glimmers. Hartman shifted in his seat, rubbing his palms against his uniform, the fabric squeaking under the pressure of panic. When the video finally appeared, the room tightened. A grainy police hallway, a desk, a superior officer, arms folded, and then Hartman. Not the Hartman who pretended authority in this courtroom, not the Hartman who swaggered in with a forged memo, but a version stripped of pretense, drunk, volatile, eyes blazing with reckless confidence. On screen, he slammed his hand against the wall. "You think you can suspend me? I run this place." His words slurred, but the aggression was unmistakable. The audience gasped in unison. Even the bailiff took a step back, as though the projection alone carried physical force. The video continued. "You do not tell me what to do. No judge tells me what to do. I can walk into any courtroom I want, make them listen. They know better." The real Hartman's face drained of color. He shook his head violently. This is fabricated. This is from years ago. It doesn't mean..." "It means exactly what it shows," Judy said calmly. "A pattern." The footage cut to another angle. Hartman leaving the office, stumbling, turning back with a smirk that chilled the room. "I'll show them," he muttered. "I'll show her." Judy paused the video at that exact moment. "Her?" she repeated aloud. "Who was her, Officer Hartman? The superior officer you threatened? The victim in this courtroom? Or..." She leaned forward just slightly. "Someone else entirely?" Hartman swallowed, his throat jumping. "You're twisting this. This is out of context. I never..." Mercer stepped forward. "Judge, the date stamp." He pointed to the corner of the screen. The courtroom fell silent again. The footage was not old. It was from 3 weeks ago. The same week the manila folder with Judy's name was assembled. The same week Hartman began telling colleagues he had something big coming. Judy's jaw tightened. "Officer Hartman, do you still claim today's confrontation was spontaneous?" His silence was louder than any confession. The victim trembled, tears forming, not from fear this time, but from vindication. Hartman lunged suddenly toward the monitor, shouting, "Turn it off! This is illegal! This is..." The bailiff intercepted him instantly, a firm hand to his chest. Hartman froze. Breath ragged, his false power collapsing faster than he could gather it. Judy did not raise her voice. She simply asked one question. "Is this the first time you plan to intimidate someone, or just the first time you failed?" Hartman's eyes darted wildly, searching the room for an ally. There were none. Judy folded her hands, gaze steady. "This footage," she said, "was delivered to me before today's hearing, and so were your threats." She paused. "And the district attorney's office has already seen them." The word district attorney hit the room like a dropped gavel. Hartman's swagger, what little remained, evaporated in an instant. For the first time all day, he looked truly afraid. Judy did not move. She simply let the silence settle, allowing the weight of her words to sink into every corner of the courtroom. The bailiff stood firm beside Hartman, ready but not aggressive, authority made visible through calm, not force. Hartman's breathing quickened, his hands shook, not with anger this time, but with the trembling recognition that the world he controlled so confidently was beginning to slip. You contacted the DA?" he stammered, "before the hearing even started?" Judy met his stare with composed precision. "I review every case thoroughly, Officer Hartman. When something concerns public safety, I do not wait for someone to get hurt." The victim lowered her head, exhaling slowly. It was the first breath she had taken without fear since he entered the courtroom. Hartman tried to stand taller, tried to summon the arrogance he had worn like armor, but it no longer fit him. His chest rose sharply, then faltered. His voice broke. "You don't understand what they made me do. he blurted. That sentence struck the courtroom like lightning, sudden, jarring, and illuminating a truth no one expected. Judy tilted her head. Made you? Explain. Hartman's gaze flicked to Mercer, to Rhodes, to the victim, and finally back to Judy, searching for sympathy, leverage, anything to hold on to. The department, my supervisors, they pushed me. They told me I had to be tougher, that I had to control my environment, that I needed to show strength. His voice cracked further. I was following instructions. They set me up to fail. Mercer's jaw tightened. They didn't tell you to threaten people. They didn't tell you to forge documents. They didn't tell you to collect files on a judge. Hartman's mask crumbled another inch. You don't get it. They expected results. They wanted someone who wasn't afraid to enforce things. Enforce, Judy repeated softly. Or intimidate. He froze. His eyes glistened, not with remorse, but with the raw panic of a man whose lies had outpaced his ability to hold them together. Then, without warning, his voice shifted, pleading, desperate. I'm not a villain. I was under pressure. I had to show authority or lose everything. You don't understand what happens to officers who don't measure up. Judy leaned forward, hands folded, her tone calm but laced with truth. Authority is not a performance, Officer Hartman. It is a responsibility. You turned it into a weapon. The victim looked up then, quiet, steady, finding strength in his unraveling. For the first time, the power he held over her dissolved into dust. Hartman stumbled backwards, gripping the edge of the table. This is all being twisted. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted respect. Judy's voice was nearly a whisper. Respect is earned. Fear is imposed. You chose the latter. The courtroom felt colder, as though the truth had drawn out all the warmth in the room. Hartman's shoulders collapsed. The badge on his chest no longer looked like a symbol. It looked like a burden sinking him deeper into the consequences he created. And then, in a strained whisper, he said the words that froze the room. There is more you don't know. Things I did because I thought I had no choice. His eyes lifted, glassy, terrified. If I tell you, everything changes. Hartman's words trembled in the stillness, fragile and dangerous, like a confession teetering on the edge of collapse. Judy didn't look away. Neither did anyone else. You said you had no choice, Judy repeated, her tone steady enough to cut through his panic. Explain. Hartman wiped his palms on his uniform, breathing in sharp, uneven bursts. The arrogance was gone. The defiance had crumbled. What remained was a man cornered, not by the court, but by his own truth. My superiors, he began. They told me they needed someone with a backbone, someone who could project authority, someone people feared a little. His voice cracked. They said the department was becoming too soft. Judy's expression didn't shift, but a faint, nearly invisible tightening around her eyes signaled she recognized the deflection. So they instructed you to threaten citizens? No, he shot back too quickly, then softer. Not exactly. Mercer stepped forward. Then what exactly did they tell you? Hartman? The officer looked down. They wanted numbers, compliance metrics, efficiency reports. I was told if people respected me, we'd get those numbers. And if they didn't, I should remind them who had the authority. Judy leaned back slightly. And you interpreted remind them as intimidation. Hartman shook his head, but his voice betrayed him. I didn't know what else to do. I was drowning. My evaluations were slipping. They told me if I didn't stand out this quarter, I'd be reassigned, maybe even demoted. So you escalated, Judy said quietly. He swallowed. Yes, but it wasn't supposed to go this far. I never intended to forge documents, Judy asked, to stalk my rulings, to threaten this victim. Each question struck him like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly. I didn't mean for it to become all of this. I just needed to get control back. The department is chaos. The public doesn't listen. Officers get mocked. Cameras everywhere. People waiting for us to slip so they can tear us apart. He looked up finally, eyes raw. I was tired of feeling powerless. The courtroom absorbed that sentence, heavy and unfiltered, powerless. The irony pressed into every corner of the room, because the man who weaponized authority now stood exposed as someone terrified of losing it. The victim watched him with a trembling jaw, not out of sympathy, but stunned recognition of the truth behind his cruelty. Judy spoke softly, almost gently. "Pressure does not excuse choices, Officer Hartman. Many people face pressure without turning it into violence." He squeezed his eyes shut. "You don't understand what it's like inside the department. The fear. The expectations. They push you until you're someone you don't recognize." Mercer's voice cut through the quiet. "No, Hartman, you push yourself. We were under the same system. None of us forged memos or threatened judges." A tremor passed through Hartman's shoulders. His final layer of self-justification slipped. His voice came out hollow. "I did target her, the victim. Not because she disrespected me, not because of the department." He lifted his eyes to Judy, haunted and ashamed, "but because she refused me." A shockwave rolled through the courtroom, audible gasps shifting bodies, disbelief rippling outward. Judy's face remained composed, but her silence deepened, heavy, deliberate. She leaned forward, gaze unwavering. "Officer Hartman," she said, voice low and sharp, "is that why you forged authority today, because she once told you no?" Hartman's denial hung in the air, thin and brittle. His silence, finally, said more than any of his excuses ever had. And in that silence, the truth began to surface. Judy waited, still, patient, pressing without speaking. The officer's throat bobbed once, twice, before he whispered, "I didn't mean for her to feel threatened." The victim's breath caught. For a moment she looked almost weightless, suspended between vindication and the ache of having her fear minimized yet again. Judy didn't allow the minimization to stand. "Officer Hartman," she said softly, "intent does not erase impact." His eyes squeezed shut as if the sentence itself stung. His shoulders sagged, the last remnants of false authority slipping off him like a discarded mask. He sank into his chair, not defeated by the court, but by the truth he could no longer outrun. "You forged the memo," Judy continued. "Yes," he whispered. "You misrepresented your authority." "Yes. You targeted a citizen because she didn't give you the personal response you wanted." The pause that followed stretched long enough to make the audience shift uncomfortably. Finally, he nodded. One small, broken movement. The victim exhaled shakily, wiping her cheek. Judy leaned in slightly, her voice calm but sharpened with justice. "Officer Hartman, intimidation does not begin with threats. It begins the moment you believe your authority entitles you to someone else's obedience." The officer swallowed hard. "I know. I lost control. The pressure, the expectations, the way people look down on us." Mercer cut in, his voice steady. "Pressure didn't forge that memo. Pressure didn't put her in danger. You did." Rhodes nodded quietly beside him. Hartman's jaw trembled. Shame finally replaced anger, settling into the lines of his face like a long-overdue truth. Judy continued, "This courtroom is not here to condemn the badge. It is here to protect the integrity of those who wear it responsibly. You used yours as a weapon." A tear slipped down Hartman's cheek, unexpected, unplanned. He wiped it quickly, embarrassed. I didn't want to be a failure," he whispered. "You became one," Judy replied gently, "the moment fear became your leadership tool." The victim closed her eyes. That sentence, delivered without rage, struck with the force of a verdict. Then, something shifted. Officer Rhodes stepped closer, voice low. "Judge, there's something you haven't heard yet." Hartman's head snapped up. "No, Rhodes, don't." Rhodes exchanged a grave look with Mercer. "Your Honor," Rhodes said, "we discovered something in the file he made of you. Something we didn't include earlier because..." He hesitated. "Because it's personal." Judy's expression didn't break, but the room felt her focus tighten. "What kind of personal?" Mercer took a slow breath. "It's about why he targeted you specifically, why he rehearsed those confrontations, why he told the victim he could control you." Hartman shook his head violently. "Stop. Don't say anything else." But the words were already forming in Mercer's throat, heavy with revelation. "Judge," he said, voice trembling, He wasn't just studying your rulings. He was obsessed with you. The file hit Judy's bench with a soft thud, too soft for the weight it carried. Inside it waited the truth no one wanted, but everyone needed. And when she opened it, even the lights in the courtroom seemed to dim. Judy pulled the manila folder closer, her fingertips brushing the worn edges. It felt used, not old, but handled repeatedly, like something revisited night after night, something studied, something nurtured. Hartman couldn't look at it. His eyes darted everywhere except where his secrets lay exposed. "Officer Mercer," Judy said, her voice steady but edged with gravity, "walk me through what I'm about to see." Mercer's breath trembled. "Yes, Your Honor." He pointed to the first page, screenshots printed from old episodes of Judy's cases, her rulings, her notes, even moments where she challenged officers who overstepped their authority. Highlighter carved aggressive marks across the margins. Judy flipped to the next page. More screenshots, more notes, more emphasis. Dark, desperate circles and arrows aimed at her strongest judicial moments. The audience shifted, unease growing like a rising tide. Then she turned to the third page. It wasn't a screenshot. It was a candid photograph, grainy, zoomed in, taken from a distance. Judge Judy stepping out of a building after a speaking event. No camera crew, no courtroom, just her. A ripple of unease shook the room. Hartman pressed both hands against his face. Those weren't meant for anything. I was studying your demeanor for training, that's all." Judy slid the page toward him. "Training requires surveillance?" He flinched. Rhodes stepped forward. "There's more." Judy turned another page. A printed weekly schedule, hers. Court session hours, production days, media interviews, arrival times. The dates stretched back months. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice low. Hartman hesitated. The silence that followed tightened around him like a closing fist. I pieced it together," he whispered. "Online, observations, officer databases, public appearances." "None of which justified compiling it into a dossier," Judy said. The victim hugged her arms, the realization hitting her like a second trauma. She hadn't just been targeted for refusing him. She'd been targeted by someone already obsessed with control. Judy flipped another page. This one contained handwritten lines, Hartman's handwriting, recognizable from the forged memo. Not notes this time, mantras. "She's not above authority. She bends like the rest. One day she will see who's really in charge. She thinks she can't be controlled." The atmosphere sharpened, fear and outrage fusing into something electric. Mercer's voice broke. "Judge, this wasn't a study. It was fixation." Hartman finally erupted, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to understand you. You undermine officers. You embarrass them. I needed to know how to handle you if the day ever came." "And today was that day," Judy said. Her voice was calm, too calm, a steady, surgical calm that cut deeper than anger ever could. Hartman froze, because now he understood. She saw him, entirely, and there was nowhere left to hide. Judy closed the folder gently, like sealing a fate already written. "Officer Hartman," she said, locking eyes with him, "you weren't preparing for a case. You were preparing for me." Judy's words, "You were preparing for me," still echoed across the room like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Hartman sat frozen, the weight of exposure finally crushing the last fragments of denial. And now, nothing stood between him and the consequences he had crafted. The courtroom felt colder now, not from fear, but from clarity. Everything that had been swirling in uncertainty was now solid, undeniable, immovable. Hartman's breath quivered as he stared at the folder, his own handwriting staring back at him like a mirror reflecting his darkest intentions. Judy let the silence breathe for a moment. It wasn't punitive. It was necessary. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, not loud, not emotional, simply unyielding. "Officer Hartman," she said, "this court has heard testimony, reviewed recordings, examined forged evidence, and now seen documentation of a personal fixation that goes far beyond professional misconduct." He flinched at the word fixation. The victim flinched at the reminder. Mercer and Rhodes lowered their heads. Judy continued, "This is more than a lapse of judgment. This is a consistent pattern of abuse, deceit, and predatory behavior." I'm not a predator, Hartman whispered, but even he sounded unconvinced. The victim rose slowly, hands trembling. For most of the hearing she had been quiet, fear muffling her voice, but now the truth had created a space where her words could finally breathe. You made me afraid to go to work, she said softly. You told me I'd lose everything if I didn't listen to you. You made me feel powerless. Hartman looked at her, eyes red, guilt finally visible, but she didn't retreat. You didn't want respect, she said. You wanted obedience. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she stood straighter, grounded by courage she didn't know she still had. Mercer stepped forward. Judge, I want to say something as well. Judy nodded. We were wrong, Mercer said, his voice thick. We saw him slipping for months, maybe years, and instead of stopping him, we assumed someone else would. That's on us. Rhodes nodded quietly beside him. We failed her, and we failed the badge. Those sentences hit Hartman harder than any accusation from Judy ever could. His fellow officers had drawn a line, not against him personally, but against the choices he made. He reached for words, but they dissolved before reaching his mouth. I didn't want, he tried. I didn't think, Judy lifted a hand, stopping him gently but firmly. What you wanted, she said, and what you did are not the same. He collapsed into his chair, shoulders shaking, not the angry tremors of earlier, but the hollow trembling of someone finally seeing the destruction they caused. Judy took a slow breath. The room followed. Today, she said, the truth has unfolded, and consequences must follow, not out of vengeance, but out of justice. Hartman's hands covered his face, the victim's eyes filled with tears, relief, exhaustion, a soft beginning of healing. Mercer and Rhodes stood steadier now, as if truth had finally lifted a weight from their shoulders. Judy placed her hand on the manila folder. Firm. Resolute. I'm prepared to issue my formal judgment, she said. But it will not be what Officer Hartman expects. The courtroom had grown impossibly quiet, so quiet that even the hum of the lights felt respectful. Officer Hartman stared at the desk, no longer fighting, no longer denying, just bracing. And Judge Judy prepared to speak the words that would carve the ending of everything he had built and everything he had ruined. Judy placed her hand on the manila folder, steady and deliberate. The room leaned into her silence, sensing that the moment had arrived, the moment consequences stopped looming and finally took shape. Officer Hartman, she began, her voice calm, measured, unwavering. You entered this courtroom intoxicated, confrontational, and armed with a forged document intended to manipulate judicial authority. He nodded faintly, eyes glassy with defeat. You intimidated a citizen, Judy continued, abused your power, falsified a chain of command, and orchestrated a confrontation you believed would elevate your authority by diminishing mine. A murmur rippled through the audience, but Judy didn't pause. You studied my rulings not to learn, but to plot. You rehearsed intimidation. You collected personal information with intent to exploit. That is not law enforcement. That is coercion wrapped in a badge. Hartman closed his eyes, shoulders trembling beneath the weight of each word. Judy then addressed the victim, turning slightly. Her voice softened, not weaker, but warmer. You showed courage not by recording him, but by walking into this room today and telling the truth, despite the fear he created. The victim lowered her gaze, tears forming. But these were different. Lighter. Braver. Judy then looked to Officers Rhodes and Mercer. And you, she said. You broke a silence that should never have existed. Loyalty is not protecting wrongdoing. Loyalty is protecting the integrity of your oath. Today, you remembered that. Both men nodded, visibly relieved to be seen, not as traitors to their brotherhood, but as guardians of its honor. Finally, Judy returned her gaze to Hartman. As to this court's ruling, she said, you are fully responsible for the harm, intimidation, and misconduct presented today. Hartman braced, gripping the table. You will provide restitution to the victim for emotional and professional damages. He exhaled shakily, relieved it wasn't worse. But Judy wasn't finished. Additionally, all evidence, including recordings, documents, the forged memo, and the contents of your personal folder, will be forwarded to the appropriate oversight authorities for formal review. His relief shattered. A sharp breath escaped him. "No, please, my career." "Your career," Judy said gently, "is the consequence of your choices. You chose intimidation over integrity, authority over accountability, fear over responsibility." Hartman's tears fell silently now, not defiant, not dramatic, just the quiet acknowledgement of a collapse he had built with his own hands. The bailiff stepped forward. The victim watched, not with triumph, but with closure. Judy delivered her final words, each one resonant and unshakably true. "You tried to intimidate justice, but justice does not scare." The gavel struck. One clean, echoing sound. The chapter closed. As Hartman was escorted out, the courtroom remained still, absorbing the truth laid bare. Arrogance believes it can bend truth, but truth stands, quiet, patient, and undefeated.